Any indication as to a possible motive?
No, we haven't got down
After
there.
a multi-state investigation, they're accused of distributing large amounts of methamphetamine and fentanyl throughout southwestern Idaho and eastern Oregon.
Explore the missing link that cast our characters into high drug trafficking areas, and it's going to connect a few dots. We're going to explore these regions and more about our cast and crew. They've all dawned from arteries that feed the heartbeat into communities, sometimes pulsating clandestine activities. On the trail from Mexico to Alaska, breadcrumbs for us, but it ain't no fairy tale. These crumbs lead to kingpins and coast-to-coast operations.
Investigation into connections between a white supremacist prison gang and Mexican cartels.
Quite a big bust. A blitz of arrests began over a week ago with 24 people taken into custody, and the search is on for 3 more. Partnership between the powerful Sinaloa cartel and a white supremacist prison gang known as the Aryan family. The haul included nearly 2 million doses of fentanyl, enough to kill everyone in Seattle and Tacoma, along with 500,000 more. These are most of the 27 indicted, with alleged links to the Aryan family prison gang and Sinaloa cartel. They are arrested in Washington and Arizona after a sweep by federal and local law enforcement. Many of the defendants had already served time within the Washington correctional system, which is where the plotting allegedly started.
And it was during those prison sentences that many of these defendants became connected with each other through their involvement in the Aryan family prison gang and other gangs, all under the umbrella of white power and white supremacy.
The alleged leader is 39-year-old Jesse James Bailey of Steilacoom, Washington. He's accused of being a principal organizer, establishing ties between the Aryan family and the Sinaloa cartel in order to distribute drugs throughout much of Washington state and Arizona. There are also links to Alaska and Nevada. During the operation, agents secretly seized drugs and equipment.
Wiretap revealed that these gangsters believed that they were robbed by other people and did not know that they were being surveilled by law enforcement. They even had the audacity to report some of these seizures as thefts to law enforcement.
The operation also hauled in more than 200 firearms, most of them AR-style weapons, which authorities say were bound for Mexico in exchange for drugs. Greed and power are apparently driving more collaboration between white supremacists and cartels.
These criminal relationships are ruthless, calculating, and they do not care who they harm.
DOC confirms to News Nation that the wife of Jesse James Bailey is among those arrested in the sweep. Candace Bailey is a former corrections officer who resigned as authorities investigated her links to an inmate and the Aryan family.
In 2022, the Oregon-Idaho High Drug Trafficking Area Enforcement Initiative's assessment claims that they surpassed any other year in output and outcomes. They claim to have disrupted and dismantled a total of 80 drug trafficking organizations, otherwise known as DTOs. A money laundering organization is known as an MLO. They claim they also disrupted and dismantled many MLOs, exceeding their projected target by 110%. Over 423,000 kilograms of illicit drugs, including substances as methamphetamine, fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine. This report covers a total of $29.2 million in illicit cash and other assets that were seized from DTOs and MLOs, criminal organizations residing and working out of the Idaho-Oregon area. This is not even including Washington, and we have to look no further than right here to connect 783 cases that were supported by criminal intelligence analysts investigations and enforcement efforts.
Attorney Josh Hurwitz announced that 98 pounds of meth, about 21,000 fentanyl pills, and 38 guns were seized during the investigations.
The crimes we are discussing today fuel addiction and cause overdose deaths. They can lead to gun violence, and they threaten the wonderful quality of life that we enjoy in Idaho. Today, we are reaffirming our commitment and our efforts to fight back against organized drug trafficking.
According to this assessment, they also accomplished identifying 29 new DTOs. They claim that all of this merchandise is coming from Mexico through arteries in Arizona and California. And there we have Xana's home state of Arizona coming into play. From Mexico to Arizona. Busted at WSU using an informant allegedly, according to news outlets, was from Oregon as well. Now, they never showed her mugshot, and people on the Facebook post were actually talking about how little time and slap on the wrist she got. She must have gotten a good lawyer. Maybe she did. Or maybe she never went to jail in the first place, and or maybe she became an informant herself. Who knows? I know that she looks like she could be Beth with a nose job, though. Same dimples and everything. Beth's sister, maybe? I don't know. Another sweep of arrests announced by the DEA and the Treasure Valley Task Force in the Idaho area. The High Desert Task Force, working out of Oregon, and also links to Nevada Task Force, as well as criminals who received indictments in the state of Nevada, would add Beth's current state, as according to news outlets and Bryan Kohberger's attempts to question her, she's living in Nevada. As you can see, quickly we're filling up the whole west side of the United States. Add to that Kaylee was born in California, another border town with strategic commerce and merchandise traveling. Travel up to Washington in Skagit County, Mount Vernon, Washington, a small town on the coast of Canada and Washington, and another strategic traveling spot. Move on over to Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls, Wraith Drum, where we have Xana, Kaylee, and Maddie all moving at different points of their lives. Another 3 strategic spots in Idaho. And well, you have a little trail from Mexico to Idaho. And that's what the DEA says they had too. And it goes all the way up, and I'm not kidding. All the way up until 4 special indictments acknowledged in the drug assessment of 2023 in the Oregon-Idaho area, acknowledged as such a big bust that they think, hopefully, they've dismantled not only roots and arteries in their own states, but all the way down to Mexico.
bust in Mexico's war on drugs as Mexican authorities arrest the son of notorious drug kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman.
The arrest of Ovidio Guzman sending shockwaves through the state of Sinaloa and its capital city, now under siege by drug cartels.
The alleged drug cartel leader is now in custody in Mexico City. As Errol Barnett reports, this is not the first time the younger Guzman has been arrested.
Well, it has been a frightening day for many in Culiacan, Mexico, after the arrest of Ovidio Guzman, whose nickname is the Mouse, the son of the notorious drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Ovidio is believed to be the top leader in the Sinaloa cartel. Today, alleged cartel members in the state's capital sent a retaliatory message to authorities using violence and intimidation. Take a look at this video here. Parts of Culiacan have been besieged, the cartel burning vehicles there and setting roadblocks in an apparent effort to intercept Guzman. They even attacked the city's main airport after a bullet struck an Aeromexico plane. Passengers took cover on board. Authorities eventually had to ground that flight. This video shows Guzman during a brief capture back in 2019. You see him there. This time, Mexican armed forces reportedly arrested him overnight in a raid just outside Culiacan. He was then transported back to Mexico City.
This is a huge blow for the Sinaloa cartel drug lords. You know, the highest rank of the Sinaloa cartel has been seriously hit, and that's why we see all these violent events all over Sinaloa, because they are upset that this happened second time around.
The first time back in October 2019, Mexican authorities carried out a failed operation to capture Guzman. It led to similar violence in Culiacan, with the cartel taking hostages and attacking civilians and military targets there. Guzman is wanted in the U.S. for trafficking of fentanyl and other drugs. He could face extradition.
The arrest of Ovidio Guzman triggered a violent response in Culiacan, Mexico, home base to the Sinaloa drug cartel. Armed groups torched cars, buses, and trucks. The son of the notorious drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was captured in a dawn raid in the city after months of surveillance. Mexico's defense secretary says security stopped a vehicle carrying the suspected drug trafficker. Once they nabbed Guzman, he says they came under heavy fire, and despite the barriers set up around Culiacan, the Air Force was able to fly Guzman to Mexico City.
Merchandise that you need to move in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, because you'd be in luck. Its proximity to major cities and markets are legit. It's a day's drive to the major Pacific Northwest, cities such as Seattle, Portland, Spokane. This allows for efficient travel and timely transportation of goods via car, or otherwise via the road. It has relatively close access to Canada and the Canadian border. That'd be beneficial for any international cargo. Highway access, well, Coeur d'Alene is served by Interstate 90, a major east-west highway in the United States. Pennsylvania is kind of like my hometown, all right? We have these forks and these weird areas that allow us to interstate travel within just a couple of hours each way. So to the north, New York. To the east, New Jersey. To the southeast, Delaware. To the south, Maryland. To the southwest, West Virginia. And then to the west, Ohio. Easy access, all from Albright, Pennsylvania. Now you can see why maybe one of their high target, high value crime organizers chose to set up shop in Pennsylvania. It has a lot of easy routes in a lot of major cities, including Philadelphia, Baltimore, Harrisburg, and more, with interstate access to 76, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and Interstate 81. Not exactly coastal, but very close to the coast, and boom, you have port access. Multiple airports, as a lot of people fly into the Poconos from New York and all other avenues of rich, fancy places to live and people who would, fly to the Poconos for the winter. My winter house. Of course, we connected Arizona from the very beginning, but Boise being one of the very first ones that was in a HIPTA area for Oregon, Idaho, was Boise. Boise is basically where it's always been popping in Idaho as far as the police. Oh, and side note, while I'm thinking about it, did anyone know that the original name of Moscow was Hog Heaven? Because OMG, I cracked a good laugh at that. Hog motherfucking heaven. Wow. And that it is. Well, for some people. Alright, so rumor has it Dylan is from Boise. Authorities claim that this is directly related to the Sinaloa cartel. Now, Sinaloa operatives claim that no person who would actually claim themselves to be a Sinaloa operative is working on United States soil. And I tend to lean towards believing that as well. Now, crime reports from intelligence from the DEA and the FBI indicate that there is an intelligence gap as far as Sinaloa's control over money launderers and drug operatives in and within the United States of America's control. And I tend to lean towards they don't have a whole lot of control over it because they don't have a whole lot of give a shit. Whereas, they care more or less that they make the money and they don't give a fuck how you run your actual business. And that is exactly what this operative told Business Insider. He's like, do we have associates there? Yes. Do we have, someone who would claim they were Sinaloa there? No. Do we have someone claiming they maybe got their stuff from Sinaloa? Yes, because Sinaloa is a brand and people want to prove that they have that good shit. That was at least the operative side of things in a nutshell. And of course, paraphrasing. I don't think it's for nothing that I'm over here telling you guys, some of this I can't prove yet, but I will. But believe me when I tell you that I see the popo and I'm over here like, you guys, I think they may be cops. And Ethan's mom's over here like, right? That part. Okay, so imagine how this felt for the family. And imagine how many victims have to come out and ask the police. We ask police to please come forward with the truth. And rarely ever do we actually hear who's busting up the pounds. And for the most part, it ain't Hispanics. Now, I'm not debating that, they have a deal worked out. But what I'm saying is this is a sheer numbers game, okay? Idaho wouldn't be really making much money for the people attempting to make money from illicit drug deals. If they don't sell drugs, they don't make money. And there just ain't that many brown folks to go around in Idaho. In fact, that's why white supremacy groups decided to attempt to make Idaho their ethno state. And besides the fact that it's on the west side of the world, and that side being, federal heavy due to federal lands and whatnot, the block is hot in Idaho. It's always been hot in Idaho Falls. It's always been hot in Boise. But Moscow has stayed in the shade. Not only that, but apparently their murders and their crime rates in general have, on the whole, decreased by a lot. So, despite all the corruption that we've seen in our, I guess it's been nearly a year, hasn't it, for a lot of you? In nearly a year, all the corruption you've seen, and we're supposed to believe that the crime rates are going down. Well, there's a reason why practically every task force article you read in the town is from, say, about 5 to 6 to 10 years ago. Back then, they used to do a lot of drug enforcement comparative to now, although they still only confiscated at relatively low amount. Doing the house's history, and I'm researching going through there, and I noticed that a couple had to sell it during one of their divorce proceedings. They owned 1122 King and inevitably had residence because in the divorce decree, it directs that they sell it and all proceeds be split between them. It awards the wife with their Boise property. So I looked up their Boise address. And not their actual address, but the house right next door is actually crime taped in the Google Maps photo, which happened to only be a few days old whenever I called it. Kind of weird. Coinky dink. Also, almost every single person who has ever owned King Road is involved in either asset management for Boise property or also has Boise property. So what if it's always been the undiscovered hub or the more corrupt hub that's been more effectively paid off? So as to not implicate any innocent individual, we're going to jump back to our fictional Moscow town, and I'm going to tell you a little story. It's about an illicit organized crime cartel. It's about how to take over a town and hold it down. Maybe the kingpins in Moscow have been doing that every time the feds came around. Or they just threw that green around until, you know how silences and monies go, like peas and carrots. So, how corrupt does the flow have to go all the way to Sinaloa, Mexico? Well, let's start at the University of I don't know. So if the University of I don't know were being led by a corrupt dean or president who ignored cartel activity going on at his university, well, I'm telling you, the town could get up to no good. For one, in the town of Moscow, the University of I don't know grants research college, which specializes in agriculture. Talented students, they can cover up whatever they want. They can put lots of rocks and groundwork, cover retaining walls, hidden basements, and illicit tunnels. In fact, the university and its brother university right across the state line are the only thing in between the town, the state, the authorities, and the state line. And guess what? There's two things people like to throw money at, and it's school and church. And guess what? Laundering organizations love churches. Why? Because the IRS and the SEC doesn't like to fuck with churches. In the IRS's case, they typically can't fuck with churches. And the SEC, they get sticky. So, if the cartel wants to get icky, Hail Mary, Son of God, lickety-splickety. Every poor preacher needs a little money. Every church needs a little rebuild. We're just gonna go through this door right here, okay? Now you have yourself a nice day. And it gets better. The university makes their own power. They have their own power plant. They have their own underground. They can get whatever chemicals they want. They're a research university. Not only can they get the chemicals and precursors for drugs, but they could also grow hydroponics underground. They have power. They even have their own sewage and water management system, meaning they have an entire private network of underground utilities. And the city, not in the zone. It's a zoning heaven for something like organized crime. Not only that, but the university has powerful alumni and its own security forces. Not only does it have a multi-million-dollar contract with the city of Moscow that's been going on for nearly 10 years, but it also has its own private security force, that is the campus security. So you've got the city who can't zone your area, your own private network of subterranean maintenance, agriculture to hide everything under, grant money to utilize, farms to plow in and get rid of any dirt or other tunneling mining activities, trash, and also, I bet you could do some pretty darn good money laundering through all of that bullshit.
It's a suspect arrested thousands of miles away from the crime scene.
An unsolved mystery no more as an arrest is made.
Unit 2, move into position. Units 3 and 4 maintain coverage on Sector 7.
It's a suspect arrested thousands of miles away from the crime scene.
The warrant was served at Bryan Kohberger's parents' house in Pennsylvania, where he was arrested 7 weeks after the slayings. Kohberger is accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students in the middle of the night back in November. He drove back home with his father in December. Now, during Kohberger's arrest, investigators took away a number of items, including medical-style gloves, a flashlight, a black sweatshirt, and size 13 Nike sneakers.
Just terrible. And again, I mean, you know, it was weird at the vigil too, that, you know, it was in an indoor arena that you look up in the rafters, they had police with binoculars, they had undercovers, they had a ton of police, the metal detectors I mentioned. There was a very real concern that the killer could show up at the vigil. I mean, even the dean of students told me that they were prepared for that. So, you know, all of that is going on in these people's minds as they're trying to grieve and figure out what's going on in their town.
Facing prison time after a major drug trafficking bust involving campus fraternities.
A little hesitant didn't think it was quite what DEA needed to get involved in, and I was surely wrong when we started looking into it. We realized we had a major drug trafficking organization with ties all the way to a Mexican drug cartel and an individual associated with that in California. From California to North Carolina, over 1,000 pounds of marijuana, steroids, ecstasy, Molly, LSD, you name it, they were distributing all of it. It was coming, being shipped through vehicles from California to North Carolina, and then through the Postal Service, and then the proceeds were being sent back the same way through proceeds, but also through Venmo, PayPal. We have over $1.3 million in transactions over Venmo with this organization. Well, they thought they were safe. They thought, you know, they were in the confines of a safe haven of a university, and then even more confined into the fraternity system. They thought, you know, that sense of loyalty. And I know you were a member of a sorority and I was a member of a fraternity, and actually we shared the same university. This is not the mission of these fraternities and universities. No parents send their kids to learn how to be drug traffickers or actually even worse, come out of college addicted to drugs, and that's what we had.
Motive, there's a reason why there's been no connection to the victims. There's a reason why everything has been so quiet, and I think that I am leaning towards what it is. And, you know, who knows what the implications of that are or how far it goes, but I don't think it is a coincidence that the kids, and, you know, anybody like a few years older calls them kids, right? And the young adults, the victims, okay? They make a direct line on the west coast of the border, and then boom, you have exactly the odd man out from Pennsylvania, where the cops are like, oh, and then accidentally this all ties into, you know, a high value target in Pennsylvania. That is a part of the two-step. They say that this was a two-step strike force, which is an organized crime drug trafficking organization task force set up with not only just law enforcement, but military, ICE, immigration, Homeland Security, asset control, the United States justice system. I mean, it goes all the way up to the most executive levels and levels of the military to perform these operations. And it's a big deal for them to come out and say, hey, you know, we really think that we are going to slow the fentanyl crisis in this area through these people connecting Nevada, Oregon, Idaho, Washington, Pennsylvania, Arizona together. And guess what? At some point in time, so do the families and so do the hometowns of the victims and the defendant of this case. I don't think that that's a coincidence. Now let's talk about the sorority or the fraternity connection, because not only did the investigation in North Carolina connect the Sinaloa cartel to the crime group that they were busting in North Carolina, but they also connected it to some of the most elite fraternities in the area that were selling the drugs through their sorority and their fraternity members. Now, this was an undercover operation that was busted through multiple informants. And going all the way back until the 2000s, we have some incidents where large undercover operations have operated inside of universities in order to bust fraternities. The first one in 2000, all the way up until 2 years ago when the North Carolina news hit the mainstream, some people critiqued the president of the university allowing that. He actually allowed the students access, and when I say students, I mean undercovers. He actually allowed undercovers as the new faces of students into the school. And if it weren't for him, you know, that decision couldn't have been made. But he stands by it, and he stands by the fact that he is keeping his students safe. And he said no regrets from him, basically. Other people say he just let drug enforcement bring their business on campus where they had no business being. Now, of course, that would, be the arguments of the fraternity brothers who were easily busted. In 2000, the cops were laughing at the students. They said it was so easy that the DEA agents who were working the case were like, bruh, we're used to being vetted by the criminals we bust because they're afraid of law enforcement. And that the fraternities they were busting in that college had none of that. And they said all you had to do was say, hey, I go to state, and boom, drugs. He said sometimes they would just carry around the cash and not even launder their money. But the DEA agents put them right up there with any other crime lord, with any other kingpin. Now, is it a coincidence that there was a shooting at a university the exact same day that our 4 victims died in the Idaho case? And coincidentally, we have no motive there either. Some of the witnesses who saw the shooting said that the kid was saying things to the guys as though he knew them, but they seemed confused, and one of them was asleep. But his dad conveyed to the news that his son had been feeling paranoid about something for a while that he wouldn't tell him about. And then it comes out that the school had investigated him for concealing a weapon on campus due to an internal tip that, of course, we don't know where that came from. He was also being investigated for some hazing incidents, which, as you may know, have been pretty prominent at not only the University of Idaho, but certainly at WSU, where more than a couple of students have died in the past few years. In a few instances, it's been fentanyl. Other times it's been fentanyl, however I said that. Other times it's been suicides from parents saying, hey, my kid wasn't suicidal. All the way up into, of course, the relation to Emma and Demetrius in the Idaho case, which is I have a thing about, because Demetrius, I get it. This one time, he happens to be kind of violent on paper or whatever, but I say kind of violent. He's kind of a lot of violent, but, so are a lot of white people around there. And I'm like, so y'all really singled out the one black dude in Idaho? Right. So we'll get to him later, but moral of the story for now, could it be him? Sure. Maybe I just don't want it to be because, he's the one black guy in Idaho. I'm rooting for you. So these guys, in an odd feat, managed to be involved in the drugs that were sold to someone who died, allegedly. Now, they conveniently get let out of jail after they were supposedly locked up in jail for like 2 or 3 months. And then randomly, the district attorney drops the case and claims that they never had jurisdiction over the case in the first place. So that is another strange incident. Another one, of course, is Bryan Kohberger. But we could go on about this all day, and I want to give all of these things their own episodes because they deserve their own episode. But moral of the story is there's definitely something strange going on in Idaho. I find it weird that in the video that was released of them searching Bryan's house, they had a warrant for the entire building. Once again, they put the entire school, WSU, on lockdown during the Bryan Kohberger event, shelter the students in place for hours on end, evacuated the entire building, wind up reporting that they killed some guy, but the roommates who originally reported this PTSD sufferer, who happened to be a veteran, magically made it out of the apartment. The cops claim he was threatening the entire community and that they had to shoot him from an outside window. It's all very strange. So are these murders. So are the murders that happened in Virginia on the same day. So are the murders that have happened on the way down to Oregon, directly off the freeway, Salem murders, which allegedly the police were looking into originally in connection with this case, and maybe they truly were. All very strange, and I'm wondering if it has anything to do with more undercover operations. Now, in the case that it does, of course, we'll never know, and those will never be announced to us, and that's kind of the bad and negative part. I don't really know what else to say about that. But I do have a whole entire undercover episode planned for you guys. Wow for the Moscow. They have high-value targets in the Huskow. Into the Treasure Valley, FBI being the most involved FBI force, apparently, allegedly, with the Salt Lake City FBI in the Idaho for murders. Now, do I think that that's a coincidence that they were also highly involved in some of the targeted task force activity with drug and crime lords in the area? No, I don't think that that's a coincidence. And you have to remember that Salt Lake City, it happens to be the headquarters for FBI in the area, and for the DEA, the Seattle, Spokane, Washington is headquarters for the DEA out of that area. So those are the particular law enforcement agencies' announcements that you might want to look out for, and the Attorney General of Idaho as well.